All right. Hi there, guys. How are you today? Good. Did you have a nice weekend? Excellent. Can I answer any questions for you before we get started today? Okay. Can we just wrap it up there then? Ugh. Not in the zone today. All right. So when we left off last week, we had taken our gadget types example. We had started integrating in custom routes and such, and had started playing a little bit with the concept of authentication. Essentially, the way we have things set up at this point is in our gadget example, we can get to the gadget index. That works just fine. We can click on a particular gadget type, and we can see a show page, see the show page for that particular gadget. But if I try to go to the gadget type new page, it ends up redirecting me to the skeleton of a login page that we have yet to complete. If I try to edit a gadget type, sends me to the login page. If I try to destroy a gadget type, sends me to the login page. And if I try to do anything with gadgets themselves, it sends me to the login page. So basically what we have at this point is we have managed to lock everybody out of what we're, for the moment, considering to be sort of the private parts, the parts that require authentication for the site. Okay? But we haven't yet actually provided the user with a way to actually log in, which I think is probably the most trouble-free way of maintaining a website. Don't let anybody get to anything important and don't give them any way of logging in. Avoid so many problems that way. And maybe it defeats the purpose of some of it too, though, right? Of course, the way that this is working right now, excuse me, the way this is working right now is that, of course, whenever I click on one of these links or try to go to one of these URLs, the URL is broken down by Rails router. It redirects me over to the proper controller and action. And what I actually have for my gadgets controller at the moment is a before filter in there that says, before we run any actions in the gadgets controller, run this method called authenticate. That authenticate method is not actually physically present here in the gadgets controller. Instead, that authenticate method is in the application controller, so that it then gets inherited into all of our other controllers. So we were able to make it work easily with both gadgets and gadget types. Okay. That actual authenticate method then calls a different method called current user. And what that current user method does is it checks to see if there is a user ID stored in our session, stored in the user's session, I should probably say. If there is a user ID in the session, then the current user method would then use that user ID to find the current user, to load the current user object essentially. Okay. Of course, if it's not there, then we just end up returning nil, right? Which means up here in the authenticate method, we end up with a true condition, so we redirect to the login page. Okay. So that's the reason that we keep running into the login page whenever we try going to so many of the different actions in our controllers. Whenever I try to go to any of the actions in the gadgets controller, they are all authenticated, so all of them result in me being redirected over to the login page. In the gadget type controller, we also run the authenticate method, but for this one we run it for all actions except index and show, which is why I was able to get to the index and show gadget type pages without being redirected to the login page. Okay. So you with me? I believe that's about where we left off. Okay. For this thing to be able to continue forward, essentially what we need is we need to come up with a way to allow users to actually log in. We do have a login page set up. Right. There it is right there. The login page itself, we built a custom route to it so we can actually get to it by just going to /login. Right. But the actual page itself is new.html.erb, right, paired up with the sessions controller. The sessions controller being the one that I've kind of designated as being responsible for handling logging in and logging out, basically management of the user's session. Right? In the session controller itself, we have a method, an action to go along with that new page, which really doesn't need to do anything. Right? There's no object to load the way that a new action typically does. We also, though, have a create, which you could think of as sort of being the login action itself, and a destroy, which would essentially become our log out action. Both of those are going to end up needing to be completed. Right? But for starters, let's go ahead and put together our actual login form. Okay. The actual login form itself, okay, I want to create, but since I don't have an object to base it on, instead of using the form for helper, the way we so often have been when creating forms, I'm going to have to use the form tag helper. Right? So just kind of creating a general form that's not specifically tied to an active record object. Right? I have to decide where it is that I actually want that form to submit to and tell it the path. Right? Where I want it to submit to is to the create action of the sessions controller. If I go out to my command line and run rake routes, looking for create for sessions, I don't actually see it listed here anywhere. Right?
Is the sessions new at the bottom?
Yep, that session's new, but we want sessions create. So that might be something that we need to add. Okay. What the method shortcut for this should be is it should be sessions path. So something like that is the way that I actually want my form to get put together. If I jump over to my browser and hit refresh, sessions path, that method doesn't exist. So I definitely need to add a route. So let me open up my routes file. Right. There's a couple of different ways I could potentially create this route. I could use the regular old match method like we've done before. Something like that. Except here I'm going to specifically want this to be a route that is posted to, that only accepts post parameters, because that's what the form's going to submit. So something like this is certainly a possibility. If I go back over and run rake routes again, now down there at the very bottom of my list, I have a route named sessions, so my sessions path method should work. It accepts post parameters, and where it's actually going to go to is to the sessions create action. So that ought to do the trick. Right. Instead of doing it that way, could I have just done post to sessions create? Another way of possibly writing the same route. If I try that way and run my routes again, I get an error. What did I leave out there? Still the error. My brain's not working so well today. Can't think of what I'm doing wrong with that one, so I'll just stick with my match route. That seemed to do the trick. Yeah, errors are all gone. Okay, so back over in the browser, I hit refresh. No more error on that page. If I actually take a look at the code, I should have a form created in there, submitting to /sessions, method post. That looks correct. That's what I want. Okay. Let's see then. For the actual form itself, let's make a label, label tag, since we don't have an active record object. for username. Didn't we say every user has a username? And we'll do a text field tag for username. Then a label tag for password. And a password field tag for password. And then I need a submit button. So submit tag for that I'll have say login on it. Good thing we know how to create these forms by hand. Scaffold generator wouldn't have done anything to help us here, since we're not basing this on a active record object. Go back and take a look at it on the page. That would be my login form. Not the most beautiful form in the world, but that's the idea. All right. Now the way I set up the actual form tag so that it submits to sessions path, when we actually submit this form, where we should end up going is to the create action in our sessions controller. Right now the create action of sessions controller is empty, doesn't do anything. So that's not going to do us any good. Submit the form all day and wouldn't get anywhere with the way create is right now. So we need to go ahead and finish off this create action. What does the create action actually need to do? Well, we could start off by seeing if we can find a user that has the username that was just submitted from the form. So we could say user equals user dot find by username. Didn't I give users usernames? Isn't that how I set it up? Do you remember? Let me jump back over to the command line and open up the console. If I just type user and hit enter, every user has an ID, a username, password digest, created at, updated at. So yeah, I called it username. Okay, so I could say find the username based on the username that was just submitted as part of the form parameters. Two possibilities might come out of that. One is that we find a user with that username. The other possibility is that we don't. So we could say if we have a user, right, and we then need to check to see if that user's password matches. The trick is the password that the user submitted from the form is sort of unencrypted, unhashed, but the actual password that we have stored in the database is a hashed copy. That's what we had gotten back over in our user model as a result of telling it that user has secure password. Okay? One of the nice things about that, though, is that when we put in this has secure password, when we called this method, it also provided us with a method called authenticate. So what I can do is say authenticate this user, and I could give it the password that was just submitted from the form. Oh, I love it when two lines come out the exact same length like that. That's fantastic. Okay. So essentially we're saying the user has submitted a username and an unhashed password. Use the username to try to find the user. If we find the user with that username, check their unhashed password by passing it to the authenticate method, which will then hash it the same way it was before it was stored in the database, and see if what's in the database and the hashed version of what they just submitted match. That'll return a true or a false. Okay. So if we find a user and they authenticate, then essentially at that point they are ready to log in, right? They've given us proper credentials and we should be able to log them in. So what do we do with them if we log them in? if they've logged in correctly? Well, basically what we need to do is we need to take their ID and we need to store it in the session, because that's what the authenticate method for the controllers was based on, the fact that we could find a user ID in the session. So I'll say into the session, into a key called user ID, store this user's ID, assign this user's ID. That way, the next time a request is made for one of the pages in our controller, right, when the authenticate method gets called and we go to look up that user, right, we'll see that there is a user ID in the session. We'll then retrieve that user from the database. We'll have them available. Right, and the authenticate method, then seeing that a user is actually available, will not redirect them to the login path. Instead, they'll just be able to go ahead and execute whatever action was supposed to come along after this authenticate method was being called. So basically just kind of let things carry on like normal at that point. And what do we want to do with them after we actually put their user ID into the session? We need to redirect them somewhere. Let's just send them to the gadget type index. That's kind of for the moment acting as our home page. So I'll say redirect to gadget types path. And how about I send along a notice? You are now logged in. Right. Now, if we're not able to find a user, or the password we give is incorrect, right, then we end up down here where my cursor is now, the false part of this if statement. What do we want to do with them in that case? We'll probably just leave them at the login form, which is technically the new page, so I'll just say render new, just show the new page again, basically. Probably be good to let them know something happened, so maybe I'll say give them a flash notice, put into the flash notice a message that says the username or password is not correct. Yeah. Let's see how that works. If I go back over to my login page and I don't put in anything at all, I stay here on the login page, but a flash message popped up that said my username or password are not correct. If I put in bad username and password, incorrect. If I put in good username, bad password, incorrect. Bad username, good password, incorrect. All right, let me try the real one. If I put in an actual existing username and password, at least I think this is one of the users I created before. Oh, it still says incorrect. I wonder what I actually did set the username and password to. Didn't I make a user called test1 with password test1? If I did, it's not working. Oh, there it goes. The password was just test, user test1 and password test. When I finally did remember the correct information, it redirected me over to the gadget types index, and I do have a flash message there that says you are now logged in. Now if I try to do a new gadget type, it lets me go to that page. If I try to go over to gadgets, it lets me do that. View a gadget, create a new gadget. So everything that I was being blocked from before, I'm no longer being blocked from. So that's it. I've logged in. I've authenticated myself. And now I'm able to access things that I wasn't able to access previously. Nice. What do you think? I guess next it would be nice if I was actually able to log back out again. It'd be kind of hard to continue testing if I can't log myself back out again. Alright, so what we need, I guess, is a log out link. Maybe I'll put the log out link so that it appears up on every page. So maybe in my application layout, I already have a little navigation section there that has links to my types in my Gadget section. I think I want to include in there also then a logout link. Did we set up a route for logging out? I don't remember seeing one. Doesn't look like it. So in my routes file, I'm going to need to add that. Let me create a new route. I'm going to name it logout, and I'm going to have it go to sessions destroy. And with this one, I think I'm going to set it up so that it only responds to delete, which is the typical way of doing destroy type links. So it has to be a delete type HTTP request in order for this match to be made in the router. Oh, I think I just remembered what I did wrong before with that post link I was trying. Probably too late to mess with it now. Alright. If I go take a look at my routes, second up from the bottom down there, a route named logout, delete request, ends up going to sessions destroy. Which means I could go ahead and finish creating my logout link over in my layout file by doing a logout path and setting the method to delete. Why does this one always come up funny? Doesn't look much better. Isn't there an ERB type in here?
Yeah, it's okay.
There it is. There we go. Somehow I got set different than all my other pages. I don't know what I did. Okay. Alright, so now I have a logout link that shows up there at the top. Right? It will take me over to my sessions controller destroy, which unfortunately right now is blank, so before we can actually expect this to work, we need to go ahead and finish that off. Not all that hard. Really what we need for destroying a session is to just remove the user's ID from the session. So I could just say in the session, in the key called user ID, set it to nil, effectively destroying it. And then I just have to decide what happens to the user. Maybe I'll say redirect them over to the Gadget types path, kind of our home page, and I'll send along a notice that says you are now logged out. Back in the browser, if I go and give it a try, click logout, I get the message you are now logged out, and if I try to go to any of the protected pages, sure enough it sends me back over to the login page, so it's behaving as if I'm logged out. Good. A little bit strange though that when I'm logged out, I still see a logout link. login link would make a whole lot more sense there, wouldn't it? Well, that's where the current user method would come in handy. That current user method that we added as part of our application controller, basically right now it's only being used by the application controller's authenticate method, and you might have wondered why not just combine those two together. Well, this current user method can actually be pretty useful all on its own, because we can use it at any time, at any place, basically, to figure out if somebody is actually logged in or not. So back over in my layout, if I wanted to selectively decide whether to show a login or a logout link, I could do something like, say, if current user then show the logout link, else maybe I'll show a login link that goes to the login path and is not a delete type method, it's just a regular get. Maybe something a bit like that. Nope, didn't like that. What did you get?
Syntax error in sessions new.
Syntax error in sessions new. Huh. Have you changed sessions new lately? The login page?
Nope. Is it referring to the sessions controller?
Yeah, sounds like it. Do you want to see it?
I haven't changed it since you last did.
Huh. So of course, new in the sessions controller is basically blank. Does it give you a line number, or?
It was referring to line 15, which is not in this one, but in the application, the HTML to BRB. It was referring to the if statement.
Peculiar. In sessions new. Okay, I don't know. Maybe there's some little difference. Let's see if we can't fix it one way or the other. The problem is that current user method that we created over in the application controller is basically not in scope here inside the view. Right? We don't have access to it. Generally, methods that you want to call from your views need to be helper methods. Methods that we would put up here in a helper for some particular type or for the entire application. Right? The methods that are available in the controllers are really just sort of available to the controllers. They're not generally something that you would call from the views themselves. But as I recall, there's a little trick we can do. What is it? Is it the helper method? Can we say helper current user? No, that didn't quite do it. There's some way to actually get that application method, that application controller method, to be seen as if it were a helper. Let's see, Rails application controller method as helper. Oh, look at that. There might be a method called helper method. Maybe that's what I was not remembering right. Let's just try calling it before I start reading all that stuff. Helper method, current user. Yay, that did the trick. So helper method. When we call the helper method method, give it the name of a method, it treats that controller method as if it were a helper so that it can then be accessed from your views, which is just what we wanted. We can have one current user method here in our application controller. It can be used from the controllers themselves, which will be useful to us. But we can also now access it from our views, so that in the view we can use it to determine whether somebody is logged in or logged out. If we want to know if they are logged in, we could even figure out as who. So now it's recognized that I'm currently not logged in, so it shows me the login link. If I click the login link, it takes me to the login page. If I do log in, the login link that was present up at the top has become a log out link, because it now recognizes that I am logged in. I could even, if I wanted to, append in a little bit of information about who I'm logged in as. Here in the log out link, if I wanted to. Maybe I'll stick a little set of parentheses after it. I'm going to change these to double quotes. And then maybe right in here, I could say current user.username. Show the username for the current user, because the current user method returns the current user object. So I'm logged in as test1. Good. All right. That's basically it for our authentication. There are some other little side issues that we have with it, though. The whole point of authentication here was that we were supposed to allow users to have their own gadgets that were basically private to that user. The way things are working right now is that once I log in, if I go over to gadgets, I see a list of everyone's gadgets. None of these gadgets were actually created by this user. Right? For that matter, I can actually go and I can destroy other people's gadgets. That's not nice. Not sure that I want to allow that to be able to happen. If we wanted to take and make the gadgets, make them so that they were tied to a specific user, and to set it up so that a user only saw their own gadgets, it would essentially come down to a matter of reworking how our basic controllers work. For example, in the index action for gadgets, right now what we're doing is we're saying just get the gadgets for all. Instead of doing that, what we would want to do is we would only want to get the gadgets that belong to the current user. We can get the current user by using our handy little current user method. We can then specifically get their gadgets just by using some built-in active record methods. So I could say current user.gadgets.all. Now on the gadget list page, the gadget index, I don't see any gadgets, but it's not because there aren't any on the system, it's because there aren't any that belong to this specific user. If I wanted to let a user create a new gadget, then down in gadget, the new action for gadget, instead of just creating a new raw gadget, you might say, what we could potentially do instead is maybe we could build a gadget specifically for this user. We could say for current user, gadgets build, and that would be the new gadget that would be created and would be used on the new page. This is all stuff we haven't seen in a while, but we went over it all back when we were working with Active Record out in the console. Right? When we started relating objects to one another, like we have users and gadgets related. Right? This was a shortcut way that we could create a gadget that already was set as belonging to a particular user. If I go to my new gadget page here, we don't really see any effect of it. Okay? But basically that new gadget that was created and made available to the form would be shown as belonging to whoever is currently logged in. Down in the create method then, we could do essentially the same thing. There's something missing from create.
It's that gadget equals gadget.new.
Say what?
Is
Yeah.
Choosing the gadget equals gadget.new.
Where did it go? Did I delete that at some point on accident? Strange. I was going to change it anyway to basically make it gadget equals gadget for the current user, gadgets.build based on params for the gadget that was just submitted. So basically the new gadget that's being created and saved would be set up as belonging to whoever a current user is. Let's see how that works. If I go and create a new gadget, original iPhone, go, create the gadget, there it is, it's created, it showed up just fine. It shows up in my list of gadgets. If I log out as test user 1 and then log in as test user 2, I should not see that iPhone.
What's the password for test 2?
Test. Yep. Test user 2 doesn't show any gadgets at all, even though that original iPhone is a gadget listed in the database. But since it doesn't belong to test user 2, they don't see it. If I log back out of 2, log back in as 1, go look at the gadgets, it's there. Okay. So essentially it would be a matter of going through and doing that same sort of thing for most everything in our gadgets controller. Okay. Probably for our gadget types controller too, at least to a certain extent. Making that changeover will actually be a little bit easier because of this other filter that we had created, the Get Gadget filter. The Get Gadget filter that we had created basically takes care of actually finding a gadget to then be fed to the show, the edit, the update, or the destroy actions. Right? All of those processes basically begin by finding a gadget based on an ID. And an ID is really just something that you can type in up here into the URL, right? Well, if there's a gadget that has an ID of 6 that belongs to user 2, the way things are right now, user 1 could just type in ID of 6 and could go see another user's gadgets. That's not good. We don't want to allow them to do that, right? The way things are normally set up by default, where we have the find by ID in all of those separate actions, we would have had to go to each one and basically say only find it if it actually belongs to that user. But since we pulled out all those find gadgets from show, edit, update, and destroy and put it here in the get gadget method by itself, we can just make that change here in one place. We can essentially say, don't just find in all the gadgets. Let's say for current user gadgets find. So we'll only find that gadget then if it's a part of the list of gadgets that belong to the current user. Fundamentally, does that work? Yeah, I'm still able to go to the show page for my original iPhone there. Go to the edit page for it. Should be able to destroy it. So it seems okay. We could just leave it at that. If somebody then monkeyed with the URL so that they tried to get a gadget that didn't belong to them, right? We just end up seeing an error in development. In production, it would be still fundamentally an error. It would be a, what do you call it? Server-side exception? Server-side error? We could probably handle that even another way if we wanted. We could say after we get the gadget, unless we have a gadget, we could say redirect to gadget's path with a notice that says that gadget could not be found. And then if I try and put in a bad gadget ID, it still failed up here. It was up there, wasn't it? Record not found. Yeah, well. We could work out something fancier if we wanted to. Let's see, what else would we need to do in the gadgets controller? I think that's pretty much it. I think the gadgets controller ought to be pretty set. Over in the gadget types controller, I guess at that point it kind of depends on how we want to consider having this thing set up. Do gadget types belong to all users? Or do all users share a common set of gadget types that were defined by some, I guess you could say, higher power, by whoever it is who can put that information into the database? Could kind of go either way. I think realistically it would probably be more useful if every user was able to define their own types. Right? Otherwise, whoever runs the site and can set up the actual gadget types would have to create a huge number of types based on every potential type of gadget that a user wanted to store. So you could have everything from smartphones to coffee grinders in there. Whereas if gadget types belonged to essentially individual users, then each user could just maintain a list of only the gadget types that they actually care about or possess in some way. I think I fell asleep there for a second. Where were we? What is the next step? What do we want to do? Is it time to go home yet? Let's, for example's sake, say that gadget types are maintained by the site owner, not by individual users. Individual users don't get to determine the gadget types. Right? Only whoever runs the website can determine gadget types. Let's do that for right now. We might come back and change it, but for purposes of the example, let's do that right now. Right? If that's the assumption that we're going to make, then at the moment we have a little bit of a problem. Because what happens right now is once you log in, You're logged in. You have the keys to the kingdom. You can create new gadget types. You can delete types. You can edit types, even if other users are using them. Right now, once you can log in, you can do anything in the world. What we might actually then need is we might need sort of a second level of user. We might need to not only have the ability to say, can you log in or can't you, but we might need to be able to say, once you are logged in, what type of user are you? Are you a regular user or are you an administrator, if that's the term we want to use, right? Something fancier, something more privileged than just a regular gadget creating user, right? That's basically the difference between authentication and what they call authorization. Authentication is essentially what we've done so far, and authentication is just proving that somebody is who they say they are, right? You say you're user 1, you know the password to prove it, great, you're user 1. We'll let you act as if you are user 1, right? Authorization, though, is a potential second step that's sometimes needed, which is where once somebody has authenticated, once we know who somebody is, we then need to, on a second level, be able to determine what it is that they are actually allowed to do, right? So what we might want to do is add something like that for Gadget's controller. Essentially, I think what we would want to do is we would want to say that for all of the actions except for index and show, you have to not only be logged in, not only do you have to get past authenticate, but you would also have to get past some level of authorization, right? Maybe what we could do is we could apply that again using a before filter. So maybe I'll say before we run the actions in this controller, call a method called allow if admin. And I only want to do that for all the actions except index and show. Just like with authenticate. So essentially we're saying for gadget types, anybody can see index and show, no problem. If you want to be able to do anything besides those two, first you have to authenticate. And then secondly, the result of the authentication has to be that you're an administrator. Right? We'll have to create that allow if admin method. There's of course the potential we might want to end up using that in other controllers as well, so we could put that method over here in our application controller. So that it'll be able to be called from any of our other controllers easily. But before we can really do a whole lot with that, we need to have a way of being able to tell if a user is an administrator or not. Right now, our users are nothing but usernames and passwords, really. So we need to have something like a role attribute available for our users so that we can see if they are an admin or if they are a regular user. So I'm going to need to make a change to my user setup. So back over on the command line, could start by actually modifying the database. I'm going to generate a new migration. I'm going to call it add role to users. And I'm going to say I want to add a new field called role. Oops. It's going to be a string, so I don't need to specify the data type. My new migration's been generated. I can do a rake db migrate to apply it. There we go. Added a column called role, which is a string, to my users table. In the browser, can I even get to my users? I can. Did we set up authentication for users? Yeah. So right now, yeah, boy, this is another place where we need to only allow if this is admin Right now, any user who can log in can also go and do anything they want to any user. Delete them, change their password, whatever. Right? So that's another one where we're going to need to only allow if they are the admin. Okay? But for the moment, I can at least get to the users. Right? If I go to create a new user right now, it just asks for a username, a password, and a password confirmation. Right? I would also need a place to be able to specify the role there. So the form for my user is now also going to need to include the ability to set a role for them. So I'll add a new field in there. F.label for role. F. what? Text field would be an easy way to go. Just let whoever's creating the new user type in the name of the role. Of course, that would be a problem with inconsistency. Admin, lowercase, admin, capital, stuff like that would be kind of a pain. Probably be best if we gave them a select component, but I'll have to go look up the syntax for it. I can't remember the syntax for creating a select by hand this way. Guess I should do that though. Let's see, Rails select. Select tag, options for select. Those are both pretty ugly. Select boxes for dealing with models. Problem is we don't have a model for the role, do we? Role is just a string. Ah, this looks like it would work though. Just regular old select. We can do that. Let's see. Person, no. Okay, so we'd say that this is for the role, and then the options are a array with subarrays. So we could do, the first one's the viewable one. Admin with value admin, and the second one of blank, no, of regular, with a value of blank. What about something like that? There we go. Let me see if I can make a new user then. User test3, I'm going to say they're an admin. Password I'm going to set to test. I added that new role attribute, but I didn't add it to what can be mass assigned. So I need to go back over to my user class, specify that role is an accessible attribute. Try that again. There we go. Now the new user test3 was created. Oh, I forgot we had done that on my list of users. Look, test2 and test3 have no gadgets, but user test1 does, which is correct. Okay, so now my users can have either blank, meaning they're a regular user, or admin, all lowercase, set as their role, which would then mean that we would have the ability to check for that. So back over in my application controller where I was putting in the allow if admin method, we could say something like if current user dot role is equal to admin, then what? Well, if they are the admin, If they are an admin, we want to let them just go on and execute whatever action they had requested to run. It's really only if they're not an admin that we want to do something. Instead of changing that to current user.role not equal to admin, I'll make this an unless instead. And kind of like we did up above with authenticate, I'll say redirect them to the login path. Maybe I'll give them a notice that says you are not authorized to access that. Or we could come up with something much scarier. Your attempted access violation has been logged. That drives people nuts, thinking that their name's gotten added to a log somewhere as having done something wrong. I never see so much panic as when I put error messages together like that. It was an accident, I just typed the wrong thing, I'm sorry. Please take my name out of the log. I go, it's just an error message, I didn't really log anything. Oh. Alright, let's see what happens now. I'm logged in as test1, which is a regular user. If I go over to gadgets, to types, to my gadget types, index comes up fine, show comes up fine. If I try to go to new, it redirects me to the login page and says I'm not authorized to access that. So basically encouraging me to log in as somebody who could access that. So that seems to work. We now have basically two different levels of users. We have this allow if admin method that we can call whenever we want to lock somebody out of something. Like in the user controller, we could say before filter, allow if admin. So now only if you log in as an admin user would you be able to access anything having to do with other users. So we've got some authentication going on, we've got some authorization going on. If your authorization ever needs to get much more complicated than this, kind of just almost an on-off Boolean type thing, there are a number of gems that are available that handle both authentication and authorization well. They can be a bit tricky to set up, a bit tricky to learn, a bit tricky to get working. Right? So usually when I'm dealing with something simple, kind of like what we have here, I don't bother using any of those fancy gems. But there's a breaking point where it would become more cumbersome for me to try to handle a more complex authentication and authorization system than it would be to get through the trouble of using one of those gems, and that's usually the point where I switch over. Usually if I'm worried about anything more than just log in, log out, admin or not admin, then I'll go and use what gem. Right? Certainly one of the most common, one of the most popular that's used for that right now in Rails is a gem called devise, D-E-V-I-S-E. So if you're interested in it, you can go look it up. There's tons and tons and tons of information because that's the one most everybody turns to when they need it. Okay? All right. Maybe just a couple of other things in here that we need to do to clean up. Right? For starters, if I log out, if I'm not logged in at all, why do I see a link for new gadget, for editing types, for destroying types? That's just mean to tease somebody like that. All that stuff, if I'm not logged in, should probably be disappeared. So let me just go over to my gadget types index. My link for new gadget, I can just say if current user. Oh wait, actually gadget types is for admins specifically, isn't it? So just current user isn't good enough. Right? What I want to be able to do there is I want to be able to say if current user and current user is an admin. That's what I want to be able to do. This capability, though, checking to see if current user is an admin, doesn't actually exist at the moment. If I jump back over to my user model, I could add that capability just as a little custom method in there. Is admin. And maybe I could just say self.role equals admin. That's either true or false. Whatever it is will be returned from the method. If I go back to the browser and take a look, my new link disappears. I could do essentially the same thing then for the edit and destroy links. So for my edit and destroy links, if there's a currently logged in user and that current user is an admin, show them, otherwise don't. There we go. I'm not logged in at all in the moment, so now I don't see the new link. I don't see the edit and destroy links. If I log in as a regular user, test 1, none of those links come back because even though I'm logged in, I'm not an admin. If I log out, log back in as an admin, test 3, then the links all come back. Very good. If I go to the show page for a gadget, there it's actually still showing gadgets that don't belong to me. I'm not logged in at all. At the moment, it probably shouldn't be showing me any information at all. Show page for my gadget types, right here. We're just going through the gadget types, all of the gadgets that belong to each of them, and creating hyperlinks for them. And then summing up the total. That's not what we want to do, because that doesn't take into account who's currently logged in. We could put a big if statement around all that, if current user, then show that user's gadgets. It's a possibility. Let's see. If current user, do all that stuff. Instead of doing gadget type.gadgets, what would we actually want to do there? We do current user.gadgets, we'll see all the user's gadgets, not just the gadgets that are part of this gadget type. See what I mean? Current user.gadgets will get all gadgets that belong to that user. Whereas here on the show page for a gadget type, what I want is just the gadgets that belong to this user and are of this particular type. Let's play with that for a second. Let me log back in. I'm going to log back in as user test 1. User test 1 right now, they have an original iPhone. Okay. Let me add another new gadget. I'll make it a tablet, an iPad, original iPad, I'll call it. Say it costs $600 and was acquired in 2011. There we go. So now user test 1 has a phone and an iPhone and an iPad in the phone category and the tablet category. Okay. If I go over to gadget types and I click on phone, it shows me phone. If I go to tablet, it shows me the tablet. If I go to calculator, it shows me nothing because that user doesn't have any calculators. If there was another user that had gadgets, I would also see those listed on this page. So I need to change this to current user, gadgets. The problem then becomes, when I go to phone, the phone type, it shows me both the iPhone and the iPad, because now we're just strictly looking at all the gadgets for this user. So I need another criteria in there. Probably need to do a where clause. And let's see, what would it be? Where the gadgets, gadget type. What's the syntax? Oh, is it like this? Gadget type is gadget type? Nope, didn't like that. Let's see, select gadgets from gadgets where gadgets user ID is 1 and gadget.gadget type equals 1. No such column, gadgets.gadget type. How are those two associated? Gadgets have a gadget type, don't they?
They belong to the gadget type.
Belong to the gadget type?
Mm-hmm. The gadget types belong.
Should that be plural?
The gadget type has many gadgets.
Has many what?
Gadgets.
Yeah. Gadget type has many gadgets.
Type dot gadgets. Or flip around.
Flip it around the other way. Well, the actual key has to be a part of the gadget itself, and that's the table we're looking at. So the foreign key that connects a gadget to a gadget type, that foreign key has to be in the gadget table because of the one-to-many relationship, many gadgets to one type. So the key would be called gadget type ID. Gadget type ID. If gadget type ID is the gadget type. Now, when I go to the phone category, I only see user's phone. When I go to the tablet category, I only see that user's tablet. Calculator category, I see nothing. Oh, there we go. I think that's a where that works. All right, now we've got to go through and we've got to do that again down here where we're figuring out the type. And again down here when we're putting together the pluralize. Oh, no way. We're not going to go do all that. What a drag. Okay. This is getting to be way too heavy of the stuff to put into a view. What if we just took care of this in the controller instead? What if back over in the gadget type controller, here we go. Whenever we go to the show page, we find a gadget type. We also then get all of the gadgets for the current user where their gadgets have a gadget type ID that matches the gadget type we're currently looking at. Really, all that heavy interacting with the model stuff, that belongs in the controller more than anywhere else. Sometimes out of sheer laziness, I'll still put a little bit here or there in a view. But in this case, that was about to become pretty crazy. trying to do that. So basically, if we know that our show action for gadget types not only needs to be able to show a gadget type, but needs to be able to show a collection of gadgets as well, then why not go ahead and get the gadgets once in the controller, and then in the show page we can just view them. So that would then mean this big gnarly statement that I just put together could instead just become @gadgets each. Same thing down here when I'm figuring out the type, @gadgets.inject. Same thing down here when I'm pluralizing. @gadgetsCount. And that would still be gadget type name that we're pluralizing. Yeah, that really simplifies things a lot. Does it work? If I go to the show page? Yep, looks like it does. So dealing with the models, any big SQL stuff you're doing, is usually best done in the controller, not in the views. Views get messy enough. Anytime you've got programming code and HTML living side by side, tends to pay to minimize the code as much as you can. Might even be a good idea if we pulled out this little bit about finding the total and stuck that in the controller as well. But I won't mess with that right now. What else do we have to do?
Show the users link.
Users link? Oh, if you're an admin? Yeah, good point. Right now I'm not logged in as admin. If I try going to users, it shoots me over to the login page. If I go ahead and log out of test 1 and log back in as test 3, there we go. Test 3, because they're an admin, users becomes another place they could go. So up at the top, in addition to showing them links to get to the types in the gadgets section, maybe if they're an admin, we also want to show them a link to get to the users section. Where I'm putting that little bit of navigation together is over in my application layout. So in my application layout, if I wanted to put in a user's link, if current user and current user is admin, oops, then I'll create a link to users. The path will be the user's path. That should do the trick. So if you're logged in and you're an admin, you see the user's link, otherwise you won't. Nothing else that we're putting in its place, just won't be there. I'm logged in as an admin right now, and sure enough, the user's link pops up. If I click on it, I go to the users section. That's good. If I log out, I'm logged in as no one. I do not see the user's link. If I log in as a regular user, I do not see the user's link. So that seems to be behaving correctly. Might want to do the same thing with gadgets. Since you can't get to anything having to do with gadgets unless you actually log in, maybe that's one that we want to hide from non-logged in users. Only logged in users see gadgets. But it would be the same basic idea. Okay. I think that's going okay. Still lots of things we could do, but that's pretty decently put together. I think we've covered most all the major concerns, one way or the other. The next thing we have to talk about, don't worry, not today, when we come back on Thursday, right, is I want to get back into talking about routes. I want to go on and talk about what are called nested routes, which are a neat little subject, although they are a wee bit complicated. A wee bit complicated to implement, but in the long run, I think they really kind of smooth things out quite a bit. So that's what we'll work on next time. Can I answer any questions? Hope you have a good afternoon then. See you Thursday.